Hello everyone, it's Christine here and I am back for our stitch along, and we are going to be doing a stitch, or actually it's a combination of stitches, but in the book it's under laid work. So I put my laid work on here, and then I decided to have a little bit of fun with the laid bit of it, and I added a little duck and her ducklings, and then I'm going to be doing a laid work egg up here, which I have started. So I'll talk you through the process. So I've got some wool here. I decided to use wool to make it a bit quicker because if I used a really thin thread, it's going to take a really long time to lay down the thread on the surface. So in laid work, it's a method that's used to cover large areas. It's a technique often used in gold work, where you're adding gold work to the surface and you want to allow the maximum amount of the expensive gold thread to be on the front. So you essentially lay down a foundation for it. The book recommends working on a strong, firm fabric and using a hoop if possible. So what I did to start was drew myself a egg shape, a sort of elongated egg shape, using my friction marker, and that will raise with heat. And then the first step is to create the outline. Now, as I say, I've already started it, so I've already done half of it, but I'll show you the process to create the outline using split stitch. So if you were coming through with your piece of wool or thread, you'd come through from the back with a knot tied at the back, and then you do your first stitch forward around the outline. And then you bring your needle back up halfway along the stitch and halfway in the middle of the stitch. So you're actually going to split it. So this is split stitch. And then you go forward, and then again you bring your needle halfway up along the stitch that you've just done and halfway through it, and then you go forward again. So each time you're splitting the previous stitch. Now let me get rid of that little bit of black. And so it creates this nice sort of like braided or plaited type look. And so always just popping up in the middle of the previous stitch to split it. And it works particularly well with wool, because you get that beautiful braided effect. It'd be great if you were doing like plaits on hair or something. Be really effective. Tree trunks you can use it for, borders, edging, outlining. It's a handy little stitch. It's funny we haven't actually got to that in the book yet, but they've got us using it already. I suppose in the book they're not assuming that you necessarily will do the stitches A to Z. Excuse me, just had a little tickle in the throat. Okay. So yeah, I didn't want to make this episode too long. That's why I did the first half of my egg, because after this we've also got to lay some trellis work, which we've done previously, and do some couching over that trellis work. So there's quite a bit involved. It's a 1.5 pages of instructions in the book. But I make it simple so you don't have to read the book. You can just stitch along. So I hope you're doing well. It's still the weekend here when I'm filming this, but you'll be watching it, I think, during the week. Yeah, during the week to come. So at the end, you just get around and you put a final stitch in your last one, and then you'll sort of come and usually come back into the first stitch that you did at the start. And then take it through to the back. Now you could at this stage continue on as I did, where you can see the one thread that has gone across from one side to the other to create the first of my stitches when I was doing the laying down of the thread on the other half of the circle. So I'll pop that into my Ort jar to keep that little bit of wool. And so I think this could be it's a thicker than Appleton wool, I think. It didn't have a label on it, so it's from my vintage thread collection. But I thought it was a good egg colour. And as I say, I thought it would just make things go a little bit faster than a thinner thread. So again, I'm just going to put a knot in the end of it. Little endy bit off. Okay, and then we're just going to pop out on just outside the edge of where we've put in that split stitch around. And so the hoop's going to benefit us here to help make sure that we don't kind of pucker up the fabric when we're doing, particularly on a shape this size, which is a reasonably large shape. You don't want to pull your thread too tightly. Now what I like to do when I'm doing this is to pop up next to where I went down, so that I keep maximize the amount of thread without having all the back stitches all the way across on the back. So I'm popping back up next to where my previous stitch went down. And that way you won't waste thread on the back. So again, I'm popping up next to where my previous stitch went down. And I'm just sort of keeping my finger on it as I pull to make sure I don't pull too tightly. If I did, what you can do is just get your needle and just sort of loosen it up a little bit if you think it's sort of starting to pull and tighten. And I like to also just make sure that my fabric's staying nice and taut. Now where was my last stitch? Down the bottom. So again, I'll come up next to that one. Oops, caught a little thread from somewhere. Where has that thread come from? From the back somewhere there. Could almost be a potato this rather than an egg, but that's okay. We'll use our imagination. We'll assume it's an egg. I just thought it might be fun to do a little play on the words of laid. And the book was suggesting just a circle, but I thought, nah, let's do an egg. I was inspired by Linda, who'd done fishbone stitch as a fish. I thought that was super inspiring. And I think I issued Linda a challenge recently. I'm trying to remember what the challenge was. It was glove stitch, a glove as a glove stitch. So I'll have to check our Facebook group and see if that's been posted. If you haven't come across our Facebook group, it's just a place where people that are stitching along can post pictures of their stitched projects. YouTube's not particularly good for that sort of sharing function. And so yeah, the link to that is in the description of this video if you wanted to wander along. Excuse me, I've got the tickles. I think it's probably hay fever because there's a lot flying around in the spring/summer. It was quite a warm day today. Well, very warm day actually, up to 30 I think it might have even got to. So I'll put one last little stitch in, and that will be my eggy shape. Again, I can just make sure that everything's nice and loose as it needs to kind of be. So I think that's pretty good. So we'll tie that off at the back. Oops, I've got a bit of a knot there, but I'm not going to worry about that. We won't stress the knot. So our next step is to get a contrasting thread. I'm thinking I'll use some of my Razzle thread, and this one is in the color RZM18. And so we're going to bring the needle to the front, and so we're going to do essentially, I think the book's suggesting a diagonal stitch. So I guess I can just start. It seems to suggest starting in the middle. Not quite sure why. So I will just lay the stitches down. So I've got a knot tied in the end, and we'll see how we go. And again, I'll save the thread by just popping up sort of. And so when I'm doing these, if I want them to kind of line up, I'll sort of hold my thread across and then try and take my needle into the fabric where it looks like it needs to go. So again, I'll pop up just along from where that last stitch was, and then I'll do my trick of holding the thread across and trying to go down where I think it needs to be. And now I'll come down to here. Okay, let's not do do what we just did. And then let's make sure we're not catching anything on the back now. And we'll pull it through. And then I'll pop along a little bit along here. Sorry, I'll get it back on screen. And then again, laying it down, popping the stitch in. Oh, now it's trying to get tingly. Okay. And I reckon that's probably enough along that way. And so then we're going to now do the stitches across in the opposite direction. So if I pop up here, if I'm going at right angles, that pretty much looks like a right angle to me. And again, just pop up as much as possible an equal distance along, lay your thread sort of across the surface and then pop into the fabric where it looks like it's about right. And if when you get it stitched in it doesn't look quite right, you can always just undo that stitch and relay it down. Okay. Sorry, I've just gone a tiny bit down too far as I lay that one down, and then one more perhaps over here to finish this off, I think. Over to here. Oops. Yeah, and we're going to be couching them down, so I think that one will hold okay. So I will use this gold thread to do the couching down, and I've just threaded that on my needle, not too long length because that can create problems. And then I think I'll start up here where I did the final stitch. And I'm just going to put little couching stitches to hold these in place. And I think because this gold thread is so fine, I might do ones across in both directions. So I'm just going across each of the intersections where I have put that trellis of the razzle dazzle. And all you'll see is a little tiny flash of gold, I think, when I finished. But I will know it's there, and it will just catch the light, I think, quite nicely. So in the book they were just doing a single little down couching stitch, but I'm going to do crosses, so I get a little star at each of the intersections. So I'm just coming out at the top and then going down at the bottom below the laid thread. And then I'm going across and doing the same, so I get a little cross. So it's really like a little star because you've got those laid pieces, and then you've got the cross that you're adding in the gold thread. I can definitely see the gold thread, so that's good. Just a nice subtle, but it goes beautifully with the that beautiful razzle thread. I'll just work my way through and do all of the intersections. Apologies if this ends up being a slightly longer video. Oops, I think I missed one there. Doesn't matter which way you do it. This time I'm doing one from bottom to top. If it was a more obvious thread, you might want to keep them, or the direction you do each of the stitches, the same. Because you might be able to see the thread laying the direction that it lays, but Given this is so fine, it won't matter. Oops, just managed to unthread my gold thread. At least it is a very fine thread, so it should be pretty easy to rethread. Yeah, with metallics, just work with a small length of them if possible, because often when you're dragging them through the fabric, it does create a fair bit of wear and tear on them. Also good to use a needle that's a bigger diameter than the thread, because that just then sort of eases the pathway for them. So it's really, I'm not getting much dragging with this particular, even though I'm going through wool and multiple layers, it's not suffering. But this particular gold thread I like because it doesn't unravel and sort of wear away as much as some of the other ones do. That's why I have it in my ready case. I've got a whole case of metallic threads, but I've got just a couple out that I keep in my immediately accessible threads. So yeah, you're just working your little crosses all the way up and down. Almost there. Just want to make sure I capture each of the intersections. And yeah, the great thing is it then just holds it really securely in place. This is almost like an Easter egg, I reckon. It's a laid work Easter egg. Could have even done it in really like foily sort of colours, blues and greens, and like Easter eggs wrapped in foil. And yeah, down on my duck down here, I just did a blanket stitch around the outside, just a regular blanket stitch to hold that edge, that raw edge nice. It's a really good one for raw edge applique blanket stitch. Must admit I prefer doing the raw edge rather than the needle turn applique. Quite like raw edges to begin with anyway. I think that's part of it. I love my frayed edges on things. Okay, just going to finish off the last of the crosses. Okay, and just checking where I haven't done one down here. Missing one down here as well, and then I think, oh no, there's one missing up there too. We'll make sure they're all done. Quite good for doing a pineapple as well. All sorts of potential applications. Okay. So there we are, and I can tie that off at the back once I am done, but I just want to show you the finished piece with those little couched down overlaid threads. So I hope you enjoyed learning a few new techniques and how you can combine them to create a laid work shape. And I look forward to seeing what you create. Thanks everyone, take care, and see you tomorrow for some ribbon embroidery. We're going to be doing loop stitch variations. So I'll see you then. Bye everyone.